This young man, Alex Hans Kahn, Rachel Nicken's son, talks about a difficult time. When Alex was a young boy, he witnessed one of the most shocking events to occur in Britain in 1992, and then an angry and mentally unbalanced man unleashed all his rage on the female sex. I remember how my mother and I walked hand in hand, under the summer sky with our dog, the sea, and everything happened so quickly. In total, Brian and Pauline Napier had 4 children when Robert Cliff Napier was born on February 25, 1966 in London. His family was dysfunctional. His parents often quarreled and all 4 children regularly saw Brian mistreating Pauline. Robert's father left the family when he was 9 years old and divorce proceedings began. The boy and his siblings received psychological therapy at this time and were placed in foster care many times. Robert claims that a doctor declared him crazy during one of these tests when he was 11 years old. Although his mother initially thought it was a joke, Robert was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and Asperger's syndrome, which the boy described as crazy. Robert was often described as a man who seemed to be in his own world, but in fact had difficulty communicating with others. Robert attended a Bywood school and dreamed of becoming an astronomer. Robert underwent psychiatric treatment for 6 years, but due to his mediocre IQ, classmates avoided him. Robert's behavior at home was very bad. He eavesdropped on his relatives' conversations and accused them of fabricating stories about him. He was also aggressive towards his younger brothers and sister, often lying and relishing the opportunity to spy on her while she was getting dressed or taking a shower. No one wanted to sit next to him, and he had no friends. When Robert was 12 years old in 1978, he went camping with a family friend and was sexually assaulted. For Robert, this was a terrible incident. Even after the attacker was sentenced to prison, Robert's behavior changed significantly. Paulina was the first to notice this. Noticing that he had become even more reclusive, family members and teachers also had the same impression, noting that the boy had become noticeably withdrawn, behaving like a robot when completing school assignments, and stopped communicating with others. Robert's behavior worsened over time, and he began to experience symptoms of depression. Robert was eventually determined to be suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, a condition that manifests itself in behavior and bizarre hallucinations. In moments when his schizophrenia caused him to lose contact with reality, the young man believed that he was a telepath, a well-educated billionaire with a master's degree in mathematics, a Nobel Prize winner, and a person who could communicate through telepathy. At the age of 16, Robert left school to take a catering course. Despite the fact that as a child Robert did not like to work, and as an adult he worked in factories doing various types of menial work, he first encountered the law in 1986 when he was 19 years old and was fined and placed on probation for violating the law, possessing an air pistol. But this was only a small part of the young man's abilities. In August 1989, Robert broke into the house of a 30-year-old woman through the back door that led to Plantstead Public Park, armed with a knife and wearing a mask to hide his identity from a 20-year-old guy. He raped the woman in front of her children. After this horrific incident, he mockingly told the victim that she had been advised not to leave the back door open. That September, Robert disappeared for several weeks without telling his family. When Robert finally returned home, he told his mother that he was being followed by some people because he had attacked a woman named Pauline. Pauline remarried in 1987 and continued to allow Robert to live in her house. She called the police not knowing whether her son was telling the truth or not, but given his illness, she could not rule out that he was the attacker. The police claimed that they checked the report of sexual harassment in the park and found nothing, but in fact they acted not to initiate a case, because the young mother would immediately complain to them. Moreover, the authorities did not even question Robert. Unfortunately, this was only the first of a series of mistakes that allowed Robert to continue his reign of terror for many years before he was stopped. Although the authorities did not take any action against the young man, Pauline decided that she had had enough and kicked her son out of the house. Numerous tragedies could have been avoided if they had carried out a more thorough check or at least taken a blood test. After this, Robert moved into a shabby room. By this time, he was fascinated by knives, various ways to end a person's life, and survival magazines. He also developed an obsession with working out and maintaining his physical condition, which allowed him to easily attack women. He eventually became known as the Green Chain Rapist because he often attacked large areas of southeast London using multiple trails, and usually armed himself with a knife, and then rope or something similar for each crime. His victims were usually young, attractive, predominantly blonde women. On March 10, 1992, Robert assaulted a 17-year-old girl, who became his next documented victim. It is undeniable that between this attack and the first attack in 1989, he assaulted other women, but the evidence was insufficient to charge him. On March 18 of the same year, for several days, a guy tried to attack a second 17-year-old girl. Thousands of people visit this park every day, but no one ever saw the criminal in action. While walking with her 2-year-old daughter in May 1992, Kay met a 22-year-old woman who recently met. When a girl was heading to a barbecue across the green chain, she suddenly saw an abandoned building behind her. In an instant, Robert violently grabbed her, threw a rope around her neck and threw her to the ground. After that, he stripped her naked, sexually assaulted her and hit her many times head. She was lucky that Robert did not kill her because the wounded, frightened and bleeding girl was able to tell the police what happened. Unfortunately, everything was about to change when a young mother named Rachel Jael Nichol met Robert in July 1992. Rachel was born on November 23, 1968 in the Essex village of Great Totham. As a child, Rachel was a good student and also showed a penchant for sports. She was even a member swimming team that has won several championships. Although the police were receiving reports of these attacks with alarming frequency, they were unable to find any evidence that could lead them to the culprit. However, now that more people were watching Green Chain, Robert decided to change the location of the attacks. She was able to attend a highly sought-after high school because her parents Andrew and Monica Nichol worked hard to give her a quality education. In her early years, she also showed an interest in community service, planning Christmas parties for seniors and working with children with special needs. Rachel, she entered the Polytechnic Institute where she met Andre Hans, a charming young man who worked as a motorcycle courier. They fell deeply in love and in 1989 they had a son, Alexander Lewis, although everyone called him Alex. At this point, Rachel stopped studying to be with her son, but she did not become a typical housewife. Instead, the young mother began to work part-time as a model and dreamed of working on children's television. Rachel also went for a morning walk with her dog Molly and Alex in a public park in Wimbledon, but July 15, 1992, this did not happen. Unlike his previous actions, the man did not just scare the girl, but killed her with a knife. After that, he raped her and fled the scene. The attack lasted only a few minutes, but it seems this time was enough to end the life of a devoted mother in front of her 2-year-old son. One of the passers-by witnessed a horrifying scene when Alex repeatedly pressed himself against his mother, begging her to wake up. The man immediately reported the incident to the police, and when they arrived they dismantled the scene and examined every detail. The victim was lying on her left side, her pants and underwear were lowered and there were obvious signs of rape. In total, forensic experts counted 49 stab wounds, mostly on the back and chest, and several cuts were found on Rachel's t-shirt and bra. The girl was brutally attacked, but Alex only had a few wounds on his face, suggesting he was being pulled face down by his assailant. Apparently this was done to tear Alex away from his mother. The Metropolitan Police launched an investigation but were unable to establish a link between this crime and other attacks that occurred in Green Chain. This was just one of several mistakes made during the costly investigation, especially given the geographical change and death. The park was loved by both dog owners and walkers, but no one witnessed the moment of the attack. A few minutes later, Robert was seen washing his hands in the creek. With the help of several witnesses, a description of the suspect and an identification of the man seen in the park were compiled and published. 32 people were detained and questioned in connection with this crime, but investigators quickly focused on a guy named Colin Stack. Colin, who lived near the park and was known to walk his dog there, had certain physical traits similar to Robert, which was disastrous for him. But since there was no other evidence linking him to Rachel's death, the police turned to criminological psychologist Paul Breen to create a profile of the attacker. Deciding that Colin matched this description, they, with the help of Paul, developed Operation Ezel, a secret operation to determine whether this man was involved in the crime. An undercover agent named Lizzie James carried out this plan. She needed to contact Colin. For several months, Lizzie pretended to be interested in a romantic relationship while trying to gather information about the crime. The only information the police could get were fantasies that could be interpreted as harsh but not necessarily judgmental. They talked on the phone and often exchanged letters sharing their personal dreams. Authorities missed numerous cases that could have led to Robert's arrest, instead choosing to spend time investigating a guy who was clearly innocent. A little over a month after Rachel was brutally attacked on August 27, 1992, Robert's neighbor called the police and reported that it seemed to be him. The guy who was sent to the post office. Detectives visited the attacker's home, introduced themselves, then interrogated him and demanded that he take a blood test at the nearest police station. No one ever thought that the fact that Robert never showed up could be a hint of something strange. A few days later, on September 3rd, the second guy said that Robert looked like the attacker. The police returned to Robert's house and once again demanded that he come to the police station and take a blood test, but the man did not show up. Due to his height of 203 centimeters, while the height of the criminal is described as 170 centimeters, a few weeks later he was removed from the list of suspects. In October of the same year, Robert again faced legal problems. This time he was taken into custody on charges of harassing a police officer, when the police searched his room as part of the investigation. They found 2 knives and a .22 caliber pistol with 244 rounds of ammunition, magazines, hand-drawn maps, notes scribbled on the pages of several newspapers, a crossbow and 6 crossbow bolts, and a guide to London. The notes included information on how to render a person unconscious, for example using tape. Other notes listed streets and map links to them, and the pages had dashes instead of black dots to indicate certain places. Robert's diary contained references to several women, one of whom he even called a filthy creature. The man was taken into custody and pleaded guilty to possession of weapons and ammunition. A psychiatrist's report was presented in court which stated that he clearly posed a serious threat to himself and society, and references were made to his severe mental condition. Despite this, he was given only an 8-week prison sentence. The police continued to make mistakes. In August 1993, they decided to arrest Colin based solely on his claims that he wrote down details of the crime scene that only the criminal could know. This mishandling of the case led to the deaths of other innocent victims, starting with Samantha Bissett. Even more amazingly, the fact that no further investigations were carried out into the disturbing evidence found in his apartment shows a clear desperation in trying to find the culprit and bring him to public attention. Samantha was born in 1966 in Dundee, Scotland. The girl was educated but determined and free-spirited, so she spent her childhood in various hippie communes. Her father was an artist who died of lung cancer when she was only 14 years old. Despite this loss, she was always supported by her mother Margaret, with whom she was very close, and stepfather Jack Morrison. Samantha became pregnant by one of her friends in one of these communities. Despite the financial difficulties associated with the fact that she was a single mother, Samantha chose not to marry and not raise her daughter Jasmine Jemima. When Jasmine was born in 1989, Margaret described it as if a light bulb had gone off in Samantha's head and the rebellious girl had become a loving mother. Samantha and Jasmine moved to London with Margaret's help. She constantly made sure everything was okay for tiny Jasmine. Samantha retained her independence despite serious maternal responsibilities. She sunbathed in the garden with her breasts exposed and walked along the balcony in her underwear. By the end of the 90s, Samantha began dating Conrad Elon, with whom she made love with the curtains open. However, all evidence suggests that Robert spied on Samantha and even watched the couple in their private moments. On November 3, 1993, while Conrad was at work, Robert knocked on Samantha's door. When the girl answered, he attacked her with a knife. He raped her after inflicting such serious injuries on her that he almost damaged her spinal cord. As in the case of the attack on Rachel a year and a half ago, this time the attacker did not limit himself to killing a young mother. Having attacked Samantha, he went to Jasmine's room and raped her before squeezing her neck until she passed out. He then left Jasmine lying on the bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and appearing to be asleep. Before leaving the crime scene, Robert leaned Samantha's body against the sofa, imitating the position he had seen her doing love with your boyfriend. A few hours later, Conrad came home from work and saw this horrific situation. Shocked, he immediately called the police. The discovery of the body of an innocent girl, abused and surrounded by stuffed toys, was described in later statements as one of the most difficult moments in the careers of those who went to scene after this incident. Samantha had more than 7 stab wounds, most of them on her back. The crime scene was reportedly so horrific that the police photographer assigned to the case was deeply shocked. The photographer was forced to take 2 years off work. At this point, the Green Chain attack investigation was already considered unsolved, but a thorough investigation was launched to find the person responsible for the murders of Samantha and Jasmine. Officers relied heavily on a fingerprint found at the crime scene to identify the perpetrator, but due to sluggish progress in the case, the first breakthrough was made. It was not until May 1994, at which point they were able to find Robert, who was 28 years old, using this evidence. After questioning and arresting the man, the police happily announced Robert's arrest and portrayed him as a dangerous man who would no longer be on the streets. However, due to obvious police errors, Colin was wrongfully detained in prison and continued to be the main suspect in Rachel's death. During his 13 months in custody, a tiny piece of DNA was found on the victim's body. Despite this, Green Chain's cases involving the attacks on Samantha, Jasmine, and Rachel were never linked. Even though forensic tests against Colin's DNA were negative, the man was not released and authorities decided to proceed with a formal trial. When the case went before a judge on September 19, 1994, she found that the police had acted excessively aggressively in attempting to frame Colin using deception tactics and lack of information. When the prosecution dropped the case due to credible evidence, Colin was eventually found not guilty and released. Robert eventually went to trial in October 1995 and pleaded guilty to the murders of Samantha and Jasmine as well as 3 additional sexual assaults on the grounds of diminished responsibility because he was diagnosed with a number of mental health problems. The 3 attacks targeted 2 17-year-old girls and a woman known only as Kay. Robert was placed under strict observation in a maximum security hospital. In December 2001, a team was assembled to investigate Rachel, but forensic services were unable to identify the victim's DNA and the case stalled again, for many years. But on November 28, 2007, advances in technology made it possible to accuse Robert of Rachel's murder. On December 18, 2008, Robert Nepper pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of Rachel Nichol after an independent investigation confirmed his involvement in the murder through repeated DNA testing. As a result, Robert Nepper was sentenced to an indefinite period of confinement in a mental hospital. Friends, write your opinion in the comments, and also subscribe to the channel and watch my other videos. Thank you all.